Hello everyone, it's Sherry from Sharecroppers, and I'm here today with our free weekly card class. This is the one that I had to postpone from last week. I appreciate your understanding, but this is Framed Occasions. So we're going to be using the Framed Occasions stamp set and also the Beautiful Shapes dies. Now, the Beautiful Shapes dies are a carryover from our Spring Mini catalog, and they coordinated with a different set in the spring catalog. Gosh, I can't remember what it was called. I have it on my shelf here. Sorry about that. Let me turn my ringer off here since I am using my phone. They went with another stamp set anyway, and they were bundled together, but these dies carried over, and these are kind of a sleeper set. There are some basic shapes, including the really popular hexagons, but there are also some that do some circles and ovals and kind of a rectangle with curved edges that also embosses, and so we're going to be using some of those today as well. I just need to share this over to my laptop so that I can see your comments up there. We'll just do a quick refresh. Now, I had posted the dimensions for each of our cards, so if you're stamping along with me, you have all of those measurements already pre-cut. Let's see if we can make this a bit bigger. There we go. Okay. And I gave you some suggestions for your cardstock and ink colors if you were using the same designer series papers that I chose. But if you are choosing something else, then you can absolutely adjust your ink and cardstock colors. So I have two regular fold cards for you. This first one here is just a basic side fold card. Has a cute sentiment, and it's layered on one of the hexagon die cuts, and we're going to be stamping some leaves and a flower and just embellishing it with a little bit of ribbon, a little twist of ribbon there. This one is kind of an intermediate card. It has some die cutting, it has some fussy cutting, has quite a bit of DSP on there, almost a full panel, so this is kind of an intermediate one. I do have a basic card for you today as well. This one is a great way to use up small pieces of designer series paper, but it's also perfect for our 6x6 prints. Each one of these squares of DSP is 1.5 inches, so you can get 16 of those from one 6x6 piece of paper. And since we're using 3, that means you could use that one piece of designer series paper to do 5 cards. So I just chose the lemons today, but you can choose any of the designs that you want. And our final card today is going to be this fun fold. It's a box card, sometimes called a shelf sitter card, and it folds flat and into a regular this is actually 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 when it's folded flat, so you can mail it in a regular envelope, and it is mailable. So we're going to get started with those. Now, my computer shows that the video has ended, and I can see on my phone that it has not. So I'm not quite sure what's happening there, but I don't know if I'll be able to see your comments. I will try. Let's see. Try one more thing. Okay, so it hasn't ended there. Okay, I can see Gail said hello. Good morning, Gail. So I haven't ended. I think I'm still here, and I'm glad you're still here with me. We're going to get started stamping though, and we're going to do this basic card first. So with this one, I've already pre-cut all of my pieces. I also already did my embossing. So on this card, I wanted a very subtle embossed cardstock. So I used the gingham embossing folder. This one also carried over from our Spring Mini catalog, and it's in our annual catalog now. This piece is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. We're going to layer that on a piece of garden green or whatever color you are choosing to go along with your designer paper. Now this one is 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. So we'll go ahead and we'll layer that right on there with flat adhesive. I'm going to use my liquid Tombow glue. And then that's going to go right on the front of our card base. So it will look just like that, very simply. Oh, good, Jean, I'm glad. So I'm not sure why it said it was ending on my end, but we're here and we're good to go. Let me know if you're stamping today with me as well. I know a lot of you watch along with me, watch me stamp, and then come back and do your cards later. That's great too. It's always available as a replay. Now with this designer series paper, it's called Tea Boutique, and there are a lot of teacup patterns on it, but there are some really great other prints as well. And I wanted to highlight those with these cards. So I chose not to use any of the teacups. Instead, I used the back sides, more of the basic prints. I also used the florals and the lemons. So not a teacup in sight today. Now, because this has kind of a light colored card base, the Daffodil Delight is light, you might choose not to put a panel inside because you'd still be able to write or stamp inside, but I always like to put a layer of basic white inside. So you can do that as well. All right, so we have our card base ready. Let's go ahead and take our pieces of cardstock and designer series paper. So in the instructions, I told you that you would need 3 squares. They're each 1.5 inch square. And then you'll also need 3 pieces of coordinating cardstock. These are 1 5/8. We're just going to layer those right on top of our squares. So our DSP right on our cardstock with flat, I'll use my liquid adhesive. This is a card design that I go to a lot when I have 6x6 paper and I want to make several cards using just a small amount of designer series paper, because this really stretches those 6x6 pieces. When we use a full card front, like we're going to on our second card, you can only get 1 card front from the 6x6. But by doing this design, you get 5 full card fronts from 1 piece. It's great for busy prints like this lemon print as well, because you can get the print but in a small dose. All right, so I have a little tip for getting these lined up perfectly on the front of your card. Use your grid paper as a tool. So we'll pull these aside, put that grid paper down. I'm using my mini Stamparatus grid paper. Now, someone asked me this week if this was a demonstrator only item, and no, this is not just for demonstrators. It's in our catalog. It's also in the online store. It's very reasonable. I want to say it's $7 or less than $7, and you get several pieces on there. I use it as my stamping surface, but I love grid paper to help me line things up. So I'm just going to position my card here on my grid pad, and I'm positioning it so that I have a defined center on here. I'm actually going to move it over this way just a little bit. So by doing it this way, I can see that I have these larger squares. These are 1-inch squares on my grid paper. I'm positioning it on my grid paper so that I have 1 column over here. That's 1/4 of an inch. I also have 1 column over here. That's 1/4 of an inch. So where these meet, this line right here is going to be the center of my card. So because I have 3 designer series paper squares, I'm going to line this up so that it is centered, which for this, it will be just slightly past those grid lines. And I'm just going to move it down so it's about in line with the second line down. So it kind of helps you to eyeball it a little bit. Another thing that will help you keep straight designs is if you have an embossing folder or a designer series paper that has some kind of a grid or a consistent linear background like the gingham. If you have something with stripes or polka dots, you can use the design in your paper or on the embossing folder to also help you line up the elements on your card front. So we'll position the one in the center first, and then we'll be able to put these on the side simply by centering them in the space that's still left. Now it shows that I have some new comments on here. I'm not seeing any. I see Jean said she wishes she could stamp right now. I see Connie that has posted something, but it's not showing me what, Connie. It just shows me a blue question mark on my end. So it's got to be something on my computer. Oh, it's your, so I can usually see your Bitmoji when it's on my computer. I don't know, there's something crazy going on today. All right, so we have the base of our card all finished. I told you this was a quick and easy one. Now I'm going to pull in one of the die cuts. I've already die cut this one. It's kind of a rectangle with rounded corners, but I'm not sure if it will pick up the embossing if I kind of turn it a little bit there. Can you see that it embosses kind of a doodle or a kind of a little swirly line on there? But it's kind of a fun little element. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to tell you was I tried to keep the ink colors really simple for this card class. So I only used 3 ink colors: Fresh Freesia, Garden Green, and Starry Sky. Now for this one, I'm just going to pull in the Garden Green and we'll stamp a sentiment right here on this little die cut. Now, if you place an order of $35 or more using the host code, you'll get these kits and this will already be die cut for you. Most of the elements, the die cuts will be die cut for you. The only thing would be a couple of them that we need to stamp before we die cut. Those would also, if you don't have the beautiful shape dies, you would also be able to just cut those with your paper trimmer as well, because they're some of the basic shapes. So I have the Thinking of You stamp sentiment already loaded up, and I'm going to stamp that right on the center of my die cut. Because it's a photopolymer stamp, we can see right where we're stamping. Perfect. Now I'm going to layer a little bit of the metallic ribbon. This is the Parakeet Party metallic ribbon from our new annual catalog. I'm going to show you some tips for using this ribbon at the end of the class. I have a few different samples for you. Now we're not using Parakeet Party cardstock, but it looks great with this card. It actually looked great with all of the different designer series papers that I chose. And I'm going to show you some tips for how to work that in, because it's kind of an off shade because of the metallics. All of those new in color metallic ribbons are a little bit off. So I have some tips for you at the end about how to coordinate those with the things that you already own. So we're just going to do a little zigzag of that metallic ribbon behind our die cut. So I'll grab some of my tear and tape and put a little tiny strip of tear and tape behind my die cut. This is just going to hold our ribbon down. We'll actually be popping this die cut up with some dimensionals after we put our ribbon on. Oops, it hitchhiked right on my scissors. All right, so now we're going to have probably about 8 inches of the Parakeet Party ribbon. I'm just going to hold that between my fingers and center my die cut on there. And then I'll just loop the tails back and forth. So we'll pull this tail around so that I have a little bit of a loop behind right there, and I can snip the tail off. And then we'll layer this piece the same way, just going in the opposite direction. I don't want my loops on the edge too big, but those are a pretty good size there. Now I'll flip this over, and before I trim my tails, I'll put my dimensionals on. That will not only hold the ribbon in place, but it will work to pop our die cut up. Now we're just going to center that here between our two squares on the right. Now I'm not centering it top to bottom, but I am kind of centering it from left to right, so that way it's kind of in the center of these two squares. And then we can go ahead and snip our tails. And the last little bit of embellishment is to add some of our Fun Flowers resin shapes here. So this is actually my ordering special as well. This will be the last class that I use these for. This was supposed to end in June, but because I had this class carry over to July, this is my last ordering special to include the Fun Flowers resin shapes. So if your order is $35 or more, you get all of the card kits, and you'll get the shapes that you need for the cards in the class. However, if your order is $50 or more, you'll get a free celebration choice, and I'll also send you a full package of the Fun Flowers resin shapes. So that ordering special is good through next Wednesday. I'm going to add two of these, a larger and a smaller one on here. Now, one thing about this is that you can easily switch up the colors in your DSP, for this card, which means you could make this card in any of these colors, make it coordinate, and you can have lots of different cards for a card set that are all similar but are all different color schemes. So they're just really fun, and they work perfectly for this paper. And we have our first card finished. Just a cute little thinking of you card, but you could always change the sentiment to anything that you would like. Thank you would be great. A cute little happy birthday one would be nice. But it's just a really simple one that's quick to mass produce as well, if you like to make several of the same card. And I kind of like the lemons there. They're nice and summery. Let's go ahead and set these aside, and we will go on to our next card. So we're going to be making this. This is a simple side fold card. I didn't put a white insert here, but I would definitely recommend putting one if you are using a dark card base like this. So this one is Starry Sky, and I started with a 5.5 by 8.5 inch piece of Starry Sky scored in the middle, so my fold is on the side. You could also make this a 10th fold card if you started with a piece that's 4.25 by 11. Just score it the opposite way. Now this one has some die cutting. I will be die cutting for the kits, the hexagon, but I will not be die cutting the circle. So if you have a circle punch or a circle die that you could use to cut that out, you will need that with the kits, but it doesn't have to be a particular size circle. And if you even wanted to fussy cut that, you could do that easily as well. All right, so this one uses one of my favorite patterns from the Designer Series paper, the cute envelopes with the flowers inside. So we are going to just put that on the front of our card with flat adhesive. Now I've already die cut this hexagon using the Beautiful Shapes dies. In the kits, this will already be die cut for you. So I'm going to just adhere that right to my card front using flat liquid adhesive. We'll be popping our sentiment up, but the hexagon is just flat. Make sure you say hello if you are popping on. I see Teresa and Joyce just popped on. I know Connie and Gail are here, and Jean. I saw Judy pop on. Judy, I'm glad to see you on here. I've been thinking of you. All right, now we need to do some stamping before we can add any more of these elements. So I'm going to go ahead and set these cards aside. Now, the kits come with some scrap white. You know it's a scrap because I've cut the corner off, and that tells you that it's not a layer, it's a scrap. If there is a white layer for a card, then you want to make sure that you don't use that for your scraps, because usually those are cut to a certain measurement. Now I'm going to pull in Thankful We Are Friends from Framed Occasions, and I'm also going to bring in my Starry Sky ink pad. Actually, I'm going to do this on my smaller scrap. The bigger scrap will be perfect for the flowers and the leaves that we're going to be stamping and fussy cutting. Now, all of these sentiments are separate, and you could stamp them in the dotted circle that we're going to here, or you could stamp them in the hexagon, which we'll do on our next card, but they kind of mix and match, which is fun. You can get lots of different looks. And I'm going to center the words inside that dotted circle. Oh, good thing I have some extra. That's a new stamp pad, and it's pretty juicy. Grab a spoon. I use my plastic spoons to kind of smush some of that ink back down in, so that way you don't have such of a risk of getting that little halo. They're very juicy when they come from the factory. Okay, let's try this again. Our stamp is all clean. I can see that it didn't squish up into our circle this time. All right, let's do our sentiment again. There we go. So this is not going to be die cut for you. You'll just get that white scrap. So I'm just going to pull it around to my die cut machine. I have it on the table behind me so that it doesn't shake the camera. And I am just going to die cut that circle. And there we have our sentiment. So this will be layered on our card front. I'm just going to set that aside because we're going to stamp and fussy cut one of the flowers and 2 sets of leaves. So let's go ahead and grab our leaves. I've mounted them on the same block, but I can see through the block. It's big enough to have one on each side. So I just kind of put them on the right side of each one. So that way I only have to use one block. Kind of save some space on my work surface. And I'm going to pull in the garden green ink. So we're going to be using the garden green full strength for the outline of the leaves, and then we'll be using it with a stamped off technique with the filler image. So I'm going to do the outline first because that's going to be the darkest. So I'm going to stamp 2 of these. Okay. Now I'll flip it over and I'm going to use the filler leaves. I'll ink it up, stamp it off once on grid paper, and then I can line it up with my leaves. Now you'll get kind of a little watercolor effect, which is nice and soft. And we'll do it one more time with this other set of leaves. Now, I did squish it down a little bit there, but I'm going to be cutting in around that with my scissors, so I'm not going to worry about that at all. We'll bring in our fresh freesia and do 1 flower. Now these don't have dies, so there is a bit of fussy cutting. It's minor though, and it doesn't have to be exact. I'm leaving a slight white border around the edge of everything that I trim. Now, if you don't have this stamp set and you just wanted to use some leaf die cuts, you could do that as well. You could use a leaf punch. We had one a few years ago that was like a 3-leaf punch. You could absolutely use that here in place of the stamped leaves. That would save you a bit of fussy cutting. You could also use our new bow punch. That would work well too. This is a great way though to stretch your stamps a bit. If you don't have a die cut machine, you can absolutely do some cutting and get the same effect. I love doing little clusters of stamped images, but not all of my stamp sets have coordinating dies, so I don't mind the fussy cutting to get that cluster look. Now this part will be tucked behind our sentiment, so I won't worry too much about the end there. Cut off some of these extra pieces that we don't need. Now remember that little bit of green ink there? We're going to cut right around that. And no one will ever know. Now I tried to line the leaves up with the outline the best that I could. But you could get a completely different look by purposely stamping it off center a little bit. So you could get a pretty pen and watercolor look, like an ink and pen image. That would be super pretty too. And it would be a completely different style of stamping. All right, just one little flower here. Now I tried to mimic the flowers from the designer series paper by stamping it with the fresh freesia, and then we'll layer one of the starry sky resin flowers over it, and it will mimic the flowers that are in the designer series paper. And I did this on our last card, the fun fold card, as well, using the same colors, because we're using a different DSP for that also has the same color scheme and the same type of flower. So we'll be doing the same kind of fussy cutting embellishment. All right, so we have our 2 sets of leaves and our flower. We are ready to start layering. So we'll pull our card base back in. I'll actually move my grid paper right out of the way. Now the first thing I'm going to do actually is put our ribbon on. So we'll grab some more of that parakeet party ribbon. Now I know that I want this, it's not really a bow, but it's kind of a loop that goes back and forth. A bit like what we just did on our first card. But it's a bit longer and it has loops on both sides and tails on both sides. So it's going to take a little bit more of the ribbon. So I'm going to kind of just make it into a Z shape there. This might be a little more than I need, but that's okay. I'd rather have a little bit extra and be able to trim it off than have it be too short and not have the loops that I want. So I'm going to make those loops just a bit smaller there. Okay. You could put some tear and tape down if you wanted, but with this one, I just am holding it with my fingers there. And I'll put some dimensionals on the back. This is kind of a faux bow on the back of our die cut. We'll make sure we use enough dimensionals to hold that ribbon in place, but it will also pop up for us when we get it on our card front. All right, let's go ahead and snip off some of those tails now. All right. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to add these leaves, and I want to add these so that they're right behind the ribbon. So it kind of gives a little shimmer effect to the leaves by having the ribbon overlap. So I'll flip this around. I can use another dimensional to just kind of hold that in place. And we'll do the same thing for this one, going in the opposite direction down here. There. And now it's ready to go on our hexagon. I just love that cluster look there. Okay, we're ready to add our flower. So the flower is going to be overlapping the circle die cut. So I'm going to add a little bit of flat liquid adhesive behind these petals, but over here, I'm going to need to put a little mini dimensional behind this petal. So that way it's still attached to my card base over here, but it has that little bit of lift. So let me grab my mini dimensionals. One just under that petal there. We'll add a little tiny bit of the liquid adhesive over here to attach it to our sentiment. There, now we're ready to add one of the larger starry sky fun flowers to our flower center. Going to cover those little dots in the center right up. And it's going to mimic those flowers that are in the envelopes. and we have our second card finished. So we're really using the DSP to make a great card base, but then having these little simple elements on there just kind of takes your card up a little notch. And it's not just DSP with a sentiment. It has some extra little touches to it. Very cute though. All right, we have one more to go. We are doing great for time. I hope I'm not going too fast, but I've really taken into consideration that so many of you have said that you don't stamp along with the live video. You go back and you watch it and you pause it when you need to. So I think that by going a little bit quicker, it might be the best for everyone. So our last one is a fun fold. This is a box fold or a shelf sitter card. This has different dimensions. It does not start with a regular card base. It's still 4 1/4 inches wide, but it's a little bit shorter. It's 10 1/2. So you're starting with 4 1/4 by 10 1/2. Now let me just grab my paper trimmer so that I can tell you the correct score lines. I've already pre-scored mine. You're going to be scoring, let me move this a little bit so that you can see as I go down. You're going to be scoring at 1/2, 1 3/4, 3 3/4, and 5. So you have 4 score lines there. 1/2, 1 3/4, 3 3/4, and 5. Okay, so this has my score lines so that it's, I scored it on this side. So when you flip it over, you'll feel the raised part there. I want you to have the raised part facing up, okay? And then we're going to turn our card so that you have this large panel here. This is the 5 1/2 inch part of your cardstock that doesn't have any score lines. So put it so that that side is facing up. Now we're going to add our designer series paper before we start folding. And this is just going to help you to know where to put your papers. So if your paper has an orientation to it, that's why I put in the directions that it needs to be 4 inches wide by 3 1/2 inches tall. I didn't want you to cut it this way and then not be able to use that piece. So 4 inches wide, 3 1/2 inches tall. We're going to glue this right down to our card base. It's going to be near the top so that you have about 1/8 of an inch border around these two sides and the top. You'll have lots of space down here. Thank you, Connie. This one's my favorite out of them too. I didn't think it was going to be. I thought it was going to be the one with the envelopes and the flowers because that was my favorite DSP, but I love the little cluster on the front of this card. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to fold along the score lines. We're going to fold on, let's see, I have to stop and think here. Nope. So not the first score line, but the second one. So the score line that is at 3 3/4, that's the one that we're going to fold on, okay? So it's not the first score line, it's the second one. So fold that right up, use your bone folder, and we're going to put some heavy duty adhesive along the front of this 1/2 inch flap. Now you can use liquid glue, but you'll have to hold it there for a minute so that it gets a really good grasp on the paper. Or you can use tear and tape, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to run it along that 1/2 inch strip. This is instant, so it's pretty quick, okay? Now, let's remove that paper backing. The sticky part is facing up, which is important. Now what we're going to do is just fold that flap back. So just use your fingers to gently fold it back, and then you're going to press it down onto your card. This ensures that it will lay completely flat, which is really important for getting all of these folds in the right place so that it will fold up to be the right size, and it will also unfold and sit on a shelf. Oh, you love the DSP. Oh, okay. Well, I like the DSP and I like the card too. I hope that you do. We've got some little fun touches here. Okay, so now we have this piece right here on the top, 2 panels. The one on the bottom is wider. The one that's on the bottom is where we're going to put our second piece of designer series paper. So I used this light fresh freesia piece. I didn't know what to call this, but it's kind of like a little, just a little pattern there. It looks kind of like a little floral pattern. So this piece is 4 by 1 3/4. I'm pretty sure that's the measurement. Yes, 4 inches wide by 1 3/4 tall. Now this is going to go on the bottom panel here. Just using flat adhesive, and we'll center it on that bottom panel. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to open up this box. The score lines, if you start to pull it up, you can see that the score lines are automatically going to form that box shape. Now we're going to keep going until, for some reason I have some metallic from the ribbon kind of floating around here. We're going to push that up, and we're going to burnish that with our bone folder, those other 2 score lines. So that way you have really crisp edges there, really crisp corners, okay? All right, so now I'm going to fold this up so that this DSP panel is on the top now and our empty panel is on the bottom, okay? So not like this. Fold it up like this. This is how it will fold when it's in an envelope. And this will help us as we put our next bit of cardstock on. So this is a coordinating color. You can use any coordinating color, but it's 3 inches wide by 5 3/4 inches long. You're going to make 2 score lines at 1 1/2, at 1/2, and 1 3/4, I believe. Yes. So 2 score lines, one at 1/2, one at 1 3/4. Now I'm going to have you take your bone folder. You're going to fold it at the one that's 1 3/4. Okay. So we're just going to burnish that down. Okay. Now we're going to have this so that the fold is on the bottom, okay? The little flap will be on the front, and we're going to add adhesive to this little flap and also to the top here. We'll flip it around in just a minute, but this is the easiest way to assemble this card and have it fold perfectly to fit in your envelope. Okay. Now I'm only going to take the paper backing off the one that's on the little flap, okay? We'll leave this one on for now. I'm going to flip this so that the flap is on the back, the fold is on the top. I have that adhesive exposed. Now I'm going to line up this folded part with the top of my card. I do not want it to extend beyond the top of my card. Hold it there and then press it down so that the tear and tape that is exposed is going to stick to this white and purple flower on your background. This front part, it can still flap, okay? Now take the paper backing off this part of your tear and tape. And then just fold it down. It's going to come a little bit above the designer paper here. It's supposed to do that. Now remember how we folded that box up? Now we're going to fold it down. We're going to open it back up again. And do you see how that score line it's folding itself? We're just going to keep extending that down so that way it's open. I'll use my bone folder to just make a nice crisp score there. And we've assembled the box part of our card. Okay. Now we can embellish the front here. So you could use designer series paper or regular cardstock. I actually chose to use an embossed piece of cardstock. This is 2 3/4 wide by 3 3/4 tall. And I embossed it using one of our new embossing folders. It's called Painted Posies. I've already done that, but I'll show this to you. This is in the annual catalog. It is so pretty. So I just did a small panel here, but I do have a whole card set that I made using it as a full panel, and that's one of the things that I'm going to show you at the end of the video. But this is just a little piece that is embossed. Now I'm going to wrap some ribbon around it before I adhere it to the front of this card. So let's set this aside. We'll pull in some of our parakeet party ribbon. I'm going to flip this around and put a little bit, let's see, I want the ribbon to come a little bit beyond each side. I'm just going to wrap it and attach it with a dimensional on the back because this whole panel is popped up with dimensionals. So that's just a bit wider than my panel. I'll grab some of my big dimensionals here. Let's see. And this is just going to wrap around the bottom, near the bottom. Okay, so we've got that attached on the back. We'll wrap it around the front so that we can see that it's straight and add another dimensional on the back. Now I'll put a few more so that it can pop right up on that garden green panel. A couple more. There. Now back in the fall when I was doing a weekly fun fold every Wednesday night, this is one of the ones that I did using the Harvest Meadow Suite, and it was so pretty in those fall colors. I like it in these nice springy colors as well though. And that will just go right on the front centered. Okay, we'll add our bow after. Okay, let's stamp the rest of our elements here. So we have our sentiment and some little sprigs inside a hexagon. So let's grab some white. We'll grab a scrap of white. Okay, so for this one, this is also not going to be die cut. This one is one that you would easily be able to just snip with your scissors if you don't have the beautiful shape dies. We'll start with our hexagon, and this will be garden green. All right, Connie, I'll see you later. Take care. Okay, So we'll just ink it up with our garden green. That's full strength. And we'll also grab our sentiments. So with this one, I did wishing you the best day ever. This is also full strength. And it will just go right in the center of our hexagon. All right, now to do those little sprigs, I'm going to show you a little masking trick because I did not want the sprigs to extend beyond the hexagon stamped image. So you can see there's kind of like that little border around the hexagon. And so I'm just going to take some Post-it notes. This is a really easy masking technique because this is a straight edge shape. And I'm just going to line my Post-it note right up with the edge of the hexagon. That's how easy that is. So we'll grab our fresh freesia and the sprig image. We'll do one over here on this side. And now I'll just move my Post-it notes over to this side and we'll do another little sprig on the left. Super easy way to get a custom die cut. Now I'm just going to take this over to my die cut machine, and this image we're going to cut using the medium hexagon. So when I show you these dies, there are all kinds of different shapes. There's some small tiny hexagons here, but then there are 3 that nest, and I'm going to be using the middle size to die cut this. And it's going to line up perfectly, but you could also use your scissors if you don't have those dies. And there we have our sentiment. Now we have a little bit of stamping and fussy cutting for our leaves and flowers. So we'll pull in our scrap of white. Quite a bit of space still on this piece that I used for my hexagon. So let's use that piece. I'm using the exact same technique for my flowers and leaves. So I'll pull in my garden green and get my leaves ready. We need 2 leaves or 2 sets of leaves and 3 flowers this time. Oops, that one didn't come out great, but that's okay. We can use that one to tuck behind our sentiment. Things like that happen sometimes. We can always find a way to fix it. I'm going to cut off some of this scrap here. Do my fussy cutting. So if you are interested in classes either online or in person. I just posted a few of them. If you are on my email list, you can see all of those classes. If you're not on my email list, that is the best way to learn about the classes and the details. So sometimes I post them on Facebook as far as the information, but the email list is the best way, and it always has the sign up link as well. So you can get information as well as sign up. And we do online classes or classes to go, as well as in-person classes here at the studio. So if you would like to join my email list, and I'd love to have you on there, it is, if you go to my blog, my website, which is www.stampinwithsharecroppers.com. The first thing that will happen when you go there is there will be a pop-up form to get on the email list, and that is the best way to find out about specials and get some free downloads. Sometimes I'll send out newsletters that have tutorials and lots of card ideas, as well as the class information. So we have a couple of to-go classes coming up. We have a to-go, which is a hybrid bingo, coming up on July 31st. That's going to be using the Sweet Cherries bundle, which is so cute. We also have 7 different prizes to give away, which is also very fun. And you can do that in person here at the studio, or you can join us through Zoom, which is kind of a fun little twist on it as well. We call it hybrid. We'll also be having in-person classes on Thursday evening, on the 21st, as well as a different class on Saturday, which is the last Saturday in July. I think it's the 30th. Does that sound right? July 30th? And that's going to be from 10 to 12. So you can get more information in the newsletter. So head on over to sharecroppers.com after the video so that you can get information on those. All right, we've got 3 flowers that we need to fussy cut now. Wouldn't a punch be perfect for these flowers? I wish we had a punch that would punch these out. They're a pretty easy cut though. Once I have them all cut out, I'll see which one I like the best, and that will be the one that goes in the front as the focal point. And then the other 2, well, I know this one will tuck behind there. The other 2 will just have a little bit of the flower peeking out from behind the sentiment. All right, so we have all of our elements ready to add to the front of our fun fold card. So the first thing that I'm going to do is layer the leaves behind my sentiment, just like we did before. So I'm just going to kind of hold that in place where I want it, flip it over, and add a dimensional on the back. So that dimensional will do double duty. It will hold the leaf in place, but it will also pop my die cut up on my panel. And then we'll do the same thing with our second cluster of leaves right up here near the top. I'll also add a couple of extra dimensionals for good measure. And now it's ready to put right on the front of our card. I will fold it flat just so that it's easier to put this on. There. Now we're ready to add our little flowers. Now I know this one is going to be tucked behind, so I'll go ahead and add a dimensional behind that and tuck it right up here behind this side. Now I want to be able to add a flower to the center, one of the little fun flowers, so I'll make sure that the center is not completely covered up. I want part of it to be exposed. Let's see, how do I want to tuck that in there? Just like that, I think. Okay, now we'll add another one to the back down here. Let's see, I think we'll put this one behind there. The other one looks like it's the best out of the three. So we'll tuck this behind. Now with this one, I'm not going to be putting a fun flower a fun flower shape there. So I'm going to tuck it behind here so that the center is covered up, because I'm not going to add the center there, but I will add it to this one. Now this one overlaps the sentiment, but it also is going to need to be popped up on this back side. So just like we did before, I'll put a little mini a mini dimensional behind one of the petals, and then for the others I'll just add a little touch of liquid glue. And now we're ready to just add those little fun flowers. And we'll also add our bow for our ribbon. I want to try to cover up the white dots in the flower center as much as I can there, which is tricky with the small ones. The larger of the fun flowers covers it up perfectly. There. Now we're just going to add a little bow from our parakeet party. Slide a little bit of it under that strip of ribbon. And there we have our fun fold. Wishing you the best day ever. See how that embossing folder just kind of peeks out behind there? It's such a pretty little addition to this card. And that is our third and final card. Now I want to show you some of the cards that I made using that embossing folder as a full background. They're so elegant and simple. I actually made 5 of them, and I made them in colors that would coordinate with the new metallic in color ribbons. But what I will tell you is the tip that I have for you today is that the ribbons do not necessarily coordinate with the in colors. They don't match as well as I would normally want to use them on a card. So what I did was I found a cardstock that worked with each of the metallic ribbons. So you can see there's that beautiful embossing folder on the background. So pretty. This is the Starry Sky metallic ribbon. But the cardstock that it matches the best is actually Night of Navy. So I use Night of Navy ink, Night of Navy cardstock, and Starry Sky metallic ribbon. Now for this card, this is the new Sweet Sorbet metallic ribbon, but the cardstock that it matches the best is polished pink. So polished pink cardstock and ink, Sweet Sorbet metallic ribbon. Oh, and that beautiful embossing folder. Now this was the truest that I could find. This is our Tahitian tied metallic ribbon and Tahitian tied ink and cardstock. And that is the only one that matched well, I will say that actually matched the same color cardstock. This is the Parakeet Party ribbon that we use today, but the cardstock and ink that matches it the best is actually Granny Apple Green. And finally, this is the Orchid Oasis metallic ribbon, and it matches the Starry Sky cardstock and ink the best. So that's my little cheat sheet for you as far as knowing which cardstock and inks match the ribbons the best. And then of course I wanted to show that beautiful embossing folder to you. It's called Painted Posies and it's from the new annual catalog. So let me set these aside. I'll show you those finished cards one more time. So I've already posted the host code and a link. So if you would like to get these 3 card kits free so that you can make your own set of cards, you can place an order through my online store using the host code, or you can just do the link that I shared and it will actually add the host code in for you. And I'll send you all 3 of these card kits. Everything will be already pre-cut and scored for you. You just have to have your own ink pads. You also will need your own stamp set. The stamp set again is called Framed Occasions, but everything else is included in your card kits. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you love the cards. I hope that you will make some cards using these designs and share them here in the free online classes group. Thanks everybody. I'll see you next Thursday with a new class. Take care.